The annual Thompson family reunion was just as unbearable as Ava remembered. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above the grand ballroom of her uncle's opulent lakefront estate, casting light on rows of couture dresses and Rolex watches. The scent of overpriced perfume lingered in the air, mingling with the thick atmosphere of self-importance that always accompanied her relatives. She stood quietly by the French doors, listening to her cousins boast about hedge funds, tech startups, and luxury vacations, all while sipping her champagne like it was armor. "Amelia, I barely noticed you," her Aunt Eleanor called out, her tone dripping with forced surprise. "Still working as a receptionist, darling." Ava gave a polite smile. "Administrative coordinator, actually." "Oh," Eleanor said, raising an immaculately tweezed brow. "Still at that small firm. What was it again?" "Silverline Strategies," Ava replied. Her cousin, Jack, fresh off making partner at his father's corporate law firm, chimed in with a smirk. "I could help you get a real job, something with actual career growth." Ava smiled again, biting back the truth that she didn't need their help. She already ran one of the most powerful consulting firms in the country. They just didn't know it yet. 10 years ago, Ava walked out of that very same estate with her heart burning and her mind racing. Freshly graduated from Wharton with an MBA and a bold new concept for rescuing collapsing companies, she had believed, naively, that her family would support her. She had poured her soul into designing a revolutionary restructuring model that could save businesses on the brink of failure. All she needed was one connection, 1 ounce of belief. She got laughter instead. Consulting, her Uncle Matthew had scoffed. "That's cute, sweetheart. Leave the real business to the men." Her cousin Ryan, just 3 years older and already appointed head of Thompson Capital's newest division, chuckled over his scotch. "Try the mailroom, Amelia, or maybe HR. Something safe, safe." That word echoed in her head for months. In the Thompson empire, women weren't leaders, they were ornaments. Ava realized in that moment that no one in her family would ever hand her a seat at the table, so she built her own. With nothing but her savings and relentless determination, Ava rented a tiny office above a hole-in-the-wall restaurant on the outskirts of Boston. She registered Silverline Strategies under a shell corporation, keeping her name off every document. No LinkedIn profile, no press releases, just results. Her first client was a family-run distribution company, bleeding cash and drowning in debt. Bigger firms had turned them down. Ava rolled up her sleeves and went in. She restructured their operations, renegotiated vendor contracts, and replaced outdated systems with lean tech-enabled workflows. 6 months later, they were thriving. Word spread, but not publicly. Ava insisted on ironclad NDAs and kept a low profile. She wasn't ready to be seen, not yet. As Silverline grew, she hired carefully. Her team was small, but fiercely loyal. Every hire was vetted, not just for skill, but for integrity and trust. They understood the mission, not just saving companies, but doing it in the shadows, often protecting businesses from predatory buyouts. Unbeknownst to her family, Ava's firm had quietly blocked more than a dozen hostile takeovers, most of them orchestrated by Thompson Capital itself. Her double life took finesse. When family asked about her job, she played the part, the unambitious admin with good organizational skills. She even kept a second office, small, unimpressive, just in case anyone stopped by. But behind the curtain, Ava was building an empire. By year 5, Silverline Strategies was operating in 5 cities. By year 7, they were rescuing Fortune 500 companies. And by year 10, Ava controlled a consulting network that influenced over $100 billion in corporate assets. Not a single Thompson knew. But all of that was about to change, because now the Thompsons were targeting a new acquisition, a company called Sterling Manufacturing, a company that, 3 months prior, had quietly become Ava's client. and now her family needed her signature. The text arrived just after midnight. Ava was reviewing restructuring projections when her phone buzzed on the desk beside her. It was from Nora, her personal assistant. Urgent, Sterling requesting emergency meeting. 9 a.m. Thompson Group, now proposing merger. Immediate response needed. For a second, Ava just stared at the screen. She read it again, then a third time. Her heart skipped. It had happened. The Thompsons had finally realized their takeover plan had failed. Now, instead of swallowing Sterling Manufacturing whole, they were begging for a seat at the table. And not just any table. Her table. Ava leaned back in her leather chair, eyes scanning the Boston skyline from her penthouse office in Silverline's sleek downtown headquarters. The irony wasn't lost on her. For years, she'd sat silently in the shadows while her family dismissed her as the girl with no ambition. Now, they were walking straight into her boardroom. She texted back, "Approved. Prepare full merger briefing. I'll lead the meeting." The next morning, dressed in a tailored navy blue suit and Louboutin heels that clicked with precision on the marble floors, Ava stepped into her private elevator. As the doors opened on the executive floor, Nora was already waiting, tablet in hand. "They're here," she said. "Your Uncle Matthew brought the full team, Ryan, Aunt Eleanor, even James from finance. Looks like a Thompson family reunion in there." Ava nodded, her face calm. "Let's make it memorable. Would you like me to serve them coffee?" Nora smirked. Ava almost laughed. "Absolutely. Tell them the administrative assistant will be right in." When she approached the glass-paneled conference room, she could hear them. Matthew's booming voice, Eleanor's sharp tone, Ryan's smug laughter. She knew them too well. They were certain they had the upper hand, that Silverline's faceless CEO would be another corporate drone, eager for prestige and profit. But they were about to meet someone else entirely. Ava stepped into the room. Conversation died instantly. Her uncle sat at the head of the long conference table, visibly confused as she walked toward the seat directly across from him. Eleanor stared at her outfit, eyes narrowing. "Ava, what are you doing here? Where's the assistant?" "I'm not bringing coffee today," Ava replied, sliding into the power seat. "In fact, I never really was the assistant." "What is this?" Ryan asked, clearly agitated. "We're here to meet the CEO of Silverline Strategies." "You are," Ava said simply. "I'm the CEO, and I've been leading this company for the past 10 years. Stunned silence. Eleanor's lip quivered. Ryan blinked. Matthew's face turned red. Before anyone could respond, Nora entered with a stack of contracts and placed them neatly in front of each stunned family member. "These are the terms under which Silverline is willing to consider your merger proposal," Ava said calmly, her voice sharp as glass. "You have until 5 p.m. to decide. After that, we start buying your shares." Ava's words echoed like thunder in the room. "I'm the CEO of Silverline Strategies." The statement shattered a decade's worth of assumptions, and the silence that followed was more satisfying than any applause. Her Uncle Matthew's jaw clenched, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the conference table. Ryan looked like he'd seen a ghost. Aunt Eleanor simply stared, mouth slightly open, as if Ava had spoken a language none of them understood. "Impossible," Matthew finally growled. "You were a secretary." "No," Ava said, her voice calm but charged with years of restrained fire. "That was a role I played so well, none of you thought to question it. You saw what you wanted to see, an invisible woman without ambition. But that was your blind spot, not mine." Nora stepped forward and tapped the tablet, projecting Silverline's financials onto the screen. Charts and figures flooded the wall. Over $122 billion in client assets under management, a 94% success rate in corporate restructuring, and a global presence in 14 cities. The Thompsons sat frozen. "These contracts," Ava continued, motioning to the documents before them, "outline the terms of a merger you now need. Not want, need. Sterling stock is rising. Your grip is slipping. Ryan tried to recover, flipping through the paperwork with shaky hands. You sabotaged us. No, Ava replied. I built something better. You tried to consume businesses for profit. I helped save them. If our paths crossed, it was because your predatory acquisitions made them desperate. James, the youngest of the Thompson cousins, and often the most observant, broke the silence. Wait, Peterson Electronics, Maritime Shipping, Davidson Group, those were you? Ava smiled. Among others. I've been behind every single acquisition you failed to close in the last 6 years. Matthew slammed a hand on the table. This is treason. No, Ava said softly. This is justice. You taught me that success was about dominance. You were wrong. Real power isn't about crushing others. It's about building something that lasts. A flicker of doubt passed through James's eyes. For the first time, he looked at Ava differently. Not as the forgotten cousin, but as the woman who'd outplayed them all. What do you want from us? Eleanor asked quietly. I want nothing from you, Ava answered. I'm offering you an opportunity. These terms are generous. You still get a seat at the table, but you'll play by my rules. If not, Silverline is prepared to acquire Thompson Group stock by tomorrow morning. No one spoke. Ava stood, smoothing the front of her suit. You taught me how to read power, how to mimic it, how to dismantle it quietly. And now you'll learn that underestimating someone because she doesn't shout doesn't mean she isn't leading. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Eleanor, that champagne you so graciously offered me last night. I own the vineyard that makes it. And with that, Ava walked out, leaving behind a room full of stunned silence and crumbling pride. By noon, Ava's phone was vibrating nonstop. Emails, texts, voicemails. From Thompson Group board members, from lawyers, even from family. Some were filled with disbelief, others pure panic. But the tide had turned. The Thompsons no longer saw Ava as invisible. Now they saw her as inevitable. The board had called an emergency vote. By 3 p.m., they officially accepted Silverline's merger proposal. The ink wasn't dry yet, but the power shift was undeniable. And Ava, calm, composed, untouchable, watched it all unfold from her corner office, like a storm she'd forecasted years ago. As predicted, her Uncle Matthew didn't go quietly. He barged into her office an hour later, voice thundering, face flushed. You've betrayed your blood, he spat. Everything we built, Ava didn't even look up from her screen. Correction, everything you built by stepping on people who couldn't fight back. We gave you everything. She laughed coldly. You gave me limits. I created opportunity. Matthew continued, ranting about loyalty, legacy, and power. But Ava was already past him. She let him talk, let him vent, let him see just how little control he had now. Then she handed him a folder. These are the final merger terms, she said, voice steel. Silverline acquires a controlling interest in Thompson Group. You may remain on board as a consultant. Page 3 outlines your compensation and responsibilities under our new direction. He flipped through the pages, hands trembling. You planned this. You set me up. No, Ava replied evenly. You underestimated me. I simply capitalized on it. The conversation ended there, but the real opportunity wasn't in punishing her family. It was in what she could build, now that she no longer had to hide. The next few days were a whirlwind. Media outlets picked up the story. The secret CEO who outsmarted her dynasty. Ava declined interviews, letting the results speak for themselves. Meanwhile, other companies, ones that had once feared the Thompson name, now reached out, eager to align with Silverline's ethical, transparent mission. Ava wasn't interested in revenge. She was interested in redesigning business itself. She rewrote the entire Thompson Group playbook. No more hostile takeovers, no more exploitation. Instead, the new model prioritized collaboration, restructuring, and long-term growth. Her board meetings were no longer rooms filled with arrogance, but with innovation and inclusion. Ava also extended offers to former assistants, interns, and junior staff who had once helped maintain her cover. They were promoted, mentored, and invited to leadership development programs. She built her empire with them, not in spite of them. It wasn't about proving her family wrong anymore. That mission was complete. Now it was about proving what business could be when led by someone who knew what it was like to be dismissed. Ava had played the long game, and now she had the power to change the rules entirely. In the weeks that followed the merger, the world saw a powerhouse. But behind closed doors, Ava was still adjusting to her own reflection. She no longer wore disguises, no more neutral-toned cardigans or low heels meant to blend in. Now it was bold suits, sharp lines, and presence. Her name, once hidden from every legal document, now stood proudly at the top of Silverline's official website. Ava Langford, founder and CEO. But this transformation wasn't just external, it was deeply internal. For a decade, Ava had trained herself to be small, to move silently, unnoticed, calculating every word, every move. She had worn invisibility like a cloak of survival. Now, stepping into the light, felt vulnerable. Empowering, yes, but vulnerable all the same. She was no longer playing defense. She was building legacy. One morning, as she walked into a leadership summit at Harvard Business School, a young woman stopped her in the hallway. Eyes wide, holding a copy of Forbes with Ava's face on the cover, she whispered, "You made me believe I could be more." Ava smiled and signed the magazine. These moments became more frequent. Emails from women in corporate finance, letters from students, phone calls from entrepreneurs who had faced the same dismissal, the same quiet ceilings Ava once lived under. Her story had rippled far beyond boardrooms and balance sheets. But the true test of growth came the day she received a call from a company she'd once dreamed of working for, Langston & Hale, the very consulting giant that had rejected her resume fresh out of grad school. "We'd love to partner on a joint restructuring initiative," the managing director said. "Your firm has set the new standard." Ava looked at the name on the screen, smiled faintly, and replied, "We'd be happy to review the proposal." She wasn't the girl seeking their approval anymore. She had become the benchmark. Inside Silverline, her leadership evolved. Ava implemented mentorship pipelines for underrepresented voices in business. She created mental health benefits, family leave policies, and a culture that valued balance as much as ambition. For her, business wasn't just about profit. It was about people. Ryan resigned quietly from Thompson Group weeks after the merger. Eleanor stopped coming to meetings. James, to Ava's surprise, asked to stay. He apologized, not just with words, but with work. He showed up, listened, adapted. Ava gave him a chance, not out of sentimentality, but because change, real change, had to start somewhere. And for Ava, change was no longer a battle. It was a choice she made every single day, to build, to elevate, to lead with purpose. The woman they once called a secretary had rewritten the rules of power, and the most remarkable thing was, she hadn't even reached her peak yet. 3 months after the world discovered her name, Ava stood beneath the golden spotlight, accepting the Business Innovator of the Year award. The applause was thunderous, but her eyes found only one person, her mother, seated in the front row, beaming with pride. Just behind her sat several women who had once been Ava's assistants, now successful executives in their own right. Ava didn't need notes. "For 10 years, I was underestimated, dismissed, overlooked," she said calmly. "I could have fought for a seat at someone else's table. Instead, I built a bigger one, big enough to lift others up with me." The audience fell silent, hanging on her every word. Real success isn't loud. It's not about ego or titles. It's about showing up, staying consistent, and knowing when the right moment comes, you move. After that night, headlines hailed Ava as a modern icon of ethical business. But for her, the most meaningful moments were quieter. Private thank you notes from young women, students saying, "You made me believe I could," founders seeking guidance, not fanfare. When Ava hosted the family reunion later that year, right in her own executive boardroom, no one dared question her anymore. She didn't need validation. She had become something far more powerful. She didn't chase power, she embodied it, quietly, gracefully, and undeniably. True power isn't loud. It doesn't always come wearing expensive suits or shouting in boardrooms. Sometimes it walks quietly in flats, listens more than it speaks, and lets others believe it's insignificant until it's not. Ava's journey proves that success doesn't require immediate recognition. Sometimes the most powerful people are those you overlook, and sometimes the most strategic thing you can do is let others doubt you while you build something unshakable behind the scenes. She didn't need to tear her family down to rise. She simply outgrew their expectations. Her success wasn't fueled by revenge. It was fueled by vision, patience, and the relentless belief that she could create something better. We often chase validation, but Ava's story reminds us that the most meaningful victories come not from being seen, but from knowing your worth, whether anyone acknowledges it or not. You don't need a spotlight to shine. You just need purpose. Whether you're being underestimated at work, overlooked in your family, or doubting your own path, remember, the long game matters. Focus on building your skills, your vision, your network, even if no one is watching. Be intentional about who you are and what you stand for. Let your work speak for itself. And when the time is right, step forward, not to prove others wrong, but to prove yourself right. Ava didn't ask for permission. She created impact in silence and let results speak volumes. You can do the same. If you enjoy deep, emotional, and meaningful stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new update. Your support is the motivation that drives us to keep bringing you powerful stories. Once again, thank you for being here, and see you in the next story.